Now, let's start planning our business strategy. What is a business strategy anyway? Strategy often comes with phrases such as, we have the lowest costs, we have the best client service, we are the leaders in our industry, or we are the first movers on this market. And all of this sounds wonderful, but this has nothing to do with strategy. These are just goals and descriptions. In reality, if our goal is to be leaders in terms of low cost, then the corresponding strategy could be produce goods in cheaper parts of the world. For instance, if we're an Italian t-shirt company, we could move our production to China. And once we're in China, we can move it to an even cheaper country like Laos, for example. Another corresponding strategy could be focusing on automation to cheapen production costs. We could invest a little more in machines and then produce for much cheaper. I mean, if we both sell a product for 85 francs, and my competitor spends 80 to produce his product, and I only spend 70, thanks to automation, then ultimately I will make a 15 franc profit, whereas my competitor will only make 5. So let's go back to our example and see if we can really be leaders in terms of costs. Like we said, our strength is that we are in California, but the corresponding weakness is it's expensive. The minimum monthly wage in California is nearly $1,600. In Indonesia, where Bali is, it's $90. We don't stand a chance in terms of low costs. And you can tell me, well, to get to Bali, you have to buy a really expensive plane ticket. To which I will reply, sure, but there are also waves in Mexico, which is right next door. Let me give you a small piece of advice I've learned over the past 20 years with business experience. It's not about beating the competition, it's about attracting the clients. I mean, the competition will always be there, and it's really not about beating them, it's about convincing your clients that you're truly the best option. In order to do this effectively, you should answer 5 key questions. Which clients would you like to attract and keep? Which markets should you be active on? What can you offer your clients specifically? What makes you stand out? What extraordinary resources and techniques do we use to provide this? How do we hold on to these exceptional resources and techniques over time? Basically, we want to ensure the durability and satisfaction of the clients. The Business Plan tool allows you to answer these questions easily. Click on Strategy in the toolbar. So now we have to think, who are our clients anyway? Before writing anything, I can show you how to identify your clientele. First, we can imagine an experienced surfer who wants to visit California. He could become a potential client. Next, we can imagine an absolute beginner who will need to be instructed. We are most likely seeing the best moment of their vacation as they finally manage to stand up on the board. Next, we can imagine a slightly more seasoned beginner. He's probably already been to several camps around the world and now wants to give California a try. Lastly, we can imagine tourists who didn't come to California for surfing, but who may want to try it out anyway. Now that we have imagined 4 possible client types, we have to figure out which ones are best suited for us. First, let's figure out how each one of these client groups gets informed about surfing activities. The pro surfer will hear about surfing camps directly from friends and other surfer buddies, and will probably consult surfing media like magazines, as well as the internet. Next, the slightly seasoned beginner will also hear about them directly, also consult surfing media, the internet, and will also probably contact travel agencies for surfers, unlike the expert. The complete beginner will likely go to travel agencies for sure to get the best advice, as well as look on the internet autonomously. Lastly, tourists will definitely go to youth travel agencies and the internet. And of course, as we discussed previously, this client group had no idea they were going to try surfing, so they won't consult any surfing media at all. But we already know that the pro surfer is very unlikely to come to a beginner level training camp. And I can guarantee you that the tourists will probably not want to try surfing, or at least a very small fraction of them. So we can eliminate the pro surfer and the random tourists. And now we are left with the complete beginner and the seasoned beginner. Now we know which specific media outlets we will have to target. We will have to contact both travel agencies as well as put ads on the internet and spread the word directly. Now let's go back to the business plan tool and report on our findings in terms of clients. We can list our target client groups in order of preference. We start with the surfer novices, then advanced beginners, thirdly visitors to California, and lastly strong surfers who are the least likely probably to come to one of our camps. But we can't stop here. We need to go into a more in-depth analysis of our clientele. Let's start by identifying the age groups. Most likely, it'll be youths from 20 to 30 years old. I myself was older, but I was a minority in the clientele. Next, we were going to aim for a 50-50 sex ratio, male to female. In reality, slightly more women than men try surfing, but this is an appropriate estimate for our clientele. You can add a description of your clientele by editing the intro text for the product user. In our example, we could modify the introduction to read, clientele will likely be between 20 to 30 and will be half male, half female. Now that we've figured out who we want to do business with, we need to figure out where we want to do business. That is, establish our geographical markets. Let's leave the business plan tool for a second and do some analysis. For our analysis, let's compare three distinct geographical regions. We have Western Europe, German-speaking Europe, and North America. As far as surfing skills go, Western Europe and North America are probably much better than German-speaking Europe, because they both have access to the oceans. There's a bit of oceans in the north of Germany, but not very much. Next, we can compare populations. Roughly 180 million people live in Western Europe, roughly 100 million in German-speaking Europe, and a gigantic 350 million in the USA and Canada, most of those in the USA. Next, we can compare economies. So the economy in Western Europe is poor to okay. Portugal and Spain have rather weak economies. In the UK, it's not so bad. German-speaking Europe has a very strong economy. And the economy in the US is generally okay. So economy is a good indicator of how much clients will want to spend from these regions. Now let's compare vacation times. Western Europe has about 4 weeks of vacation, so that's quite a lot. It is the same amount in German-speaking Europe. Lastly, North America and Canada have very small amounts of vacation compared to Europeans. So now if we think in terms of clientele, well, the USA has very little vacation, so it's unlikely that they'll want to come to camps. On the other hand, Western Europe has a lot of vacation, but they undoubtedly have many pro surfers because of their exposure to the ocean, and their economy is quite weak, so they may not want to spend lots of money to come to California. This leaves German-speaking Europe, with a large population, a large amount of vacation, and a good economy and spending power. So amidst these three groups, these are the most likely to come to our camp. Once again, we can move our findings into the business plan tool in order of preference. Currently, the most interesting market for us is German-speaking Europe, as mentioned before. Next, we want to target Canada and the USA, and lastly, the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. Here we also see distributors. Since we provide services, that is surf camps, and not a product, our distributors might be travel agencies, like Wave Tours or Pure Surfers. This could be a good idea as they can help us define prices for our services. Now we can look at our financial goals. By pressing Add Product, we can add all the service details. Here you can fill out the expected sales for a given product over the next 5 years. For example, we can define the price listings for a vacation, as well as the amount of quantities we want to sell over the next 5 years. So for instance, in 2018, we may want to sell 50 camps for a unit price of 1,000 francs, on which we will have to spend 400 francs in accommodation and petrol and other services. So we will obtain a 600 franc margin. We can fill out the similar numbers for 2019 through to 2022. As you see, we can expect to sell more over the coming years. We can now fill out all our products, as well as the projected sales and profits for the next 5 years of economic activity. Once you have filled this, we have a clear strategy based on our clientele, our region of activity, as well as our economic goals.